to the Fantasy Football Fanalist Podcast, presented by Fantasy Data. Here's your hosts, Billy Muzio and Bradley Stalder.
Oh, yeah, everybody. It's Friday. That means it's the Fantasy Football Fanalist Podcast time.
More like Friday.
The puns are already coming down. So we have tonight, if you missed last show on Tuesday, so we're starting to record now, folks, Tuesdays and on Fridays. So make sure to catch them. We're going to be loading in the Tuesday nights because it's like 1 a.m. Eastern time for Bradley when we're done. It's pretty late for all of you on the East Coast. So we'll load them into YouTube on Tuesdays. Fridays will be our live shows. So make sure to go back and watch our Arizona Cardinals show from Tuesday. And tonight, Atlanta Falcons team projections, analysis, and we are still giving league-winning takes. I'm going to kick it off here first and foremost with Matt Ryan. And I'm just going to say, no quarterback has really seen his ADP fall more in 2020, from 2020 to 2021 than Matt Ryan. I mean, after losing Julio Jones in June with the trade to the Tennessee Titans, Matt Ryan has, lost his trusted number one wide receiver that he's leaned on for most of his career. I mean, he's finished 2020 as quarterback 12. He's now being drafted around quarterback 18 off the board. I've seen in some scenarios in the 20s, which is just absurd, I think. And he has the addition of Kyle Pitts, which certainly helps his draft stock. But, I mean, it never helps to lose a wide receiver one, and it never really bodes well for fantasy purposes. Matt Ryan did finish 2020 12th overall with 26 touchdowns. He was 4th in yards with 4,581. He was 17th in deep ball completion percentage, and he was 3rd in air yards with 329 per game. Even with the loss of Julio, I still think Matt Ryan should remain a viable fantasy option for your fantasy drafts.
Absolutely. I think Matt Ryan is the perfect quarterback two for your league. He's got the yardage, he'll complete touchdowns, and he's at a value, frankly, right now. We've talked about him losing stock because he lost his number one wide receiver in Julio Jones, but that was more so a financial transaction more than anything. And we saw how Julio and Matt Ryan had that connection. They would gain lots of yards, but not a lot of touchdowns. Calvin Ridley, who we'll talk about in a little bit, was much more of the touchdown guy. And so Matt Ryan is a very good quarterback two option. He's not going to give you the Konami code. I have Matt Ryan projected for 37 rush attempts, which I think is a little generous, and 114 rushing yards for over a 17-game season. Let's be real. Matt Ryan is maybe going to get 1 or 2 rushes a game. He's not going to give you anything really in the rushing game, but he's a pocket passer. He's known for getting the yards. As Billy said, 3rd in air yards, 329 a game. He's 5th in attempts. I don't think that changes very much under Arthur Smith. I don't think the running back core is designed to be run heavy like it was in Tennessee when Arthur Smith was the offensive coordinator there. So will Matt Ryan maybe go down to like 7th? Possibly. He was 10th in money throws among quarterbacks. So him still having a 4.2% touchdown rate, I think that's going to go up we would expect it to regress to the mean. And he was 3rd in red zone attempts. There were serious questions about whether Matt Ryan was going to be the starter for the Falcons come fall 2021. There were a lot of rumors of, are they going to draft Kyle Pitts? Are they going to draft Justin Fields? Are they going to draft Mac Jones, given that they were in the 4 spot? But the Falcons took an evaluation of what their future is going to be, and the future quarterback is not yet on the roster. At least we don't believe A.J. McCarron is the future of the Atlanta Falcons. So, this is Matt Ryan's team with a new weapon in Kyle Pitts. And I mean, they evaluated who would be there. The newest weapon is there. He's my projected quarterback 11 because of all the yards and the touchdowns that I anticipate Calvin Ridley will be catching this year. So fire up your Matt Ryans. He's a very safe quarterback too. I wouldn't really reach for him to be a safe quarterback one though.
Yeah, our projections are very similar. I'm about 20 fantasy points less than you. So, but not much in the grand scheme of things here come the close of 2021. I have him for 601 attempts, so about 47 less than you have. 397 completions, 66% completion percentage, same as you. At 46.84 in yards, I have 30 touchdowns and 13 interceptions. And just the traditional Matt Ryan, 31 rushes, 127 on the ground. So nothing spectacular there as we normally see. But I think that's what we expect from him kind of year in and year out. He's like you said, he's not a Konami code quarterback. He slings the rock. And I think with or without Julio, he still has Calvin Ridley. He has the addition of Kyle Pitts, like you said. I still think there are lots of ways for him to achieve this number in fantasy. Not to mention, Bradley, they acquired my boy Mike Davis. And I know this is something that you and I have debated most of the offseason. We even had a debate when we had Prize Picks on from Brett from Prize Picks. I do believe I won that debate, according to Brett. But nonetheless, Mike Davis joined the team here. He finished, sneaky running back 12 last year in 2020 with PPR points, but he was signed by the Falcons this offseason as the number one running back in this backfield. His contract includes 2-year deal worth $5,500,000, including a $1.5 million signing bonus and a $3 million guarantee, an average salary of $2,750,000. Davis finished 2020 with 8 touchdowns, 642 rushing yards in just 12 games started. Added another 59 receptions for 373 yards and 2 more scores through the air. I mean, he was the 3rd best running back in the league, entire league, Bradley, in juke rate, 32.1%. 8th in the league in evaded tackles with 72. He was running back 13 in fantasy points per attempt with 1.25. I mean, Davis should see the field early and often. I like Mike Davis. I also think that he's going to be heavily involved in this passing game with 137 vacated targets. Yes, we have a lot of those going to Pitts. Yes, we have Gage getting bumped up, but I do think that Mike Davis sees a good share of those as well. He's my running back 19 heading into 2021, but possesses RB1 upside on a weekly basis.
Ooh, that's so rich, Billy. That's so rich. Oh, man. I don't know if I have the money to pay out for Mike Davis, and I haven't gotten him anywhere. I'm not willing to pay that price. I see running back 15 to 20 still is too expensive, which seems to be about where he's actually, I think he's going more like RB25 in ADP. I'm a little bit lower than average draft position. He's my running back 28. I'm just not convinced of the upside in this offense long term. I think short term, like the first 4-6 weeks, sure, he's going to be very heavily involved. I could definitely see him catching passes, but there's a lot of other running backs that could get run. And I'm also not convinced that the Atlanta Falcons are done at signing or adding anyone in the backfield. Adrian Peterson, for instance, is still out there in free agency, and he could be a grinder and frankly take away a lot of those carries. Adrian Peterson said he's not done either. So I see the pass catching capability, and I think that could definitely buoy him up even higher. I'm just not convinced. And I know I laid it out, and I know I lost that debate with Brett as the moderator. I thought I put up a pretty good fight. So if anyone wants to go back to our prize picks, the audience can be the judge. I would reiterate the same. Really, that status from then till now hasn't changed much. No. So if anything changes, I only see downside with Mike Davis. Like, I don't see any narrative where, like, from his average draft position that he can continue to rise. Because the only thing that can happen is, like, for instance, Javian Hawkins steps in. He was a popular undrafted free agent, especially in rookie dynasty leagues that have been drafted late. Like, I saw a lot of fantasy analysts on Twitter saying, who are your top undrafted free agents that you should be targeting at the end of rookie drafts? Javian Hawkins stood out as one of them. I'm just not convinced that Javian Hawkins is the answer for being a grinder. Maybe Quadre Allison, who we'll touch on in a little bit as well. But Caleb Huntley, Cordero Patterson, these are all running backs we'll touch on in just a bit. But I'm not convinced that they're all role players in certain situations. So if we want to talk about Hawkins, we can. I'm out on price for Mike Davis. He's my running back 28. I'll let someone else gamble on this player going into 2021.
So we had Josh said that he likes the wide receivers better that are going in this risk range here. And I just wanted to pull this up. That's why I was trying to pull up my Twitter, because that's what the board was in a quick access. So apparently it doesn't want to zoom in, only the right side. So Mike Davis is, on average, he's going in the middle of 5. I've grabbed him in the middle of round 6, which I of course love. That's like running back 25 to 27 range. That's like Gaskin. So today he went as running back 23. I see what Josh's saying. I mean, I like Cooper Kupp. I like T. Higgins. I like Thielen. I like Lockett. I think that range is a little high for me as well. I like to get him towards like the end of 5 and the turn of 6 when I can. Just because I said I think he's going to finish as 19. There's running backs being drafted ahead of him right now, like Travis Etienne, who I actually have projected for less points in 2021, but he's being drafted ahead of him, including by myself in a lot of drafts, just based upon flow or ADP or where people are going. I like the upside that Davis has. And as of right now, I mean, it's a clear stranglehold on the number 1 position inside this offense, which is a ton of vacated targets. But there is a lot of players in that area that I also like that are going in that same range.
So a couple players that I have projected slightly above Mike Davis. I have James Conner, Leonard Fournette, James Robinson, and Travis Etienne, all right, like in that, probably the same tier. Like there's risk in that type of running back. That's the running back dead zone for this year, if you would like. And if you want to take your shot on Mike Davis, so be it. If you are a Mike Davis believer, you have my blessing. I suppose, but I'm not enthusiastic about taking him in round 5 of these types of redraft leagues.
All right, fair enough. So other notable running backs for the team, let's go to Javian Hawkins. I mean, he seems to be kind of the late round darling that we're seeing, especially in these FFPC drafts. Standing at 5'9", 183 pounds. I mean, came out of Louisville. Picked up as an undrafted rookie free agent here for Atlanta. Most have him pegged as the number 2 in this offense behind Mike Davis. My question is pass blocking. It could be a contributing factor to him and how much he's going to see the field here in his rookie year. That's my only real concern with him. I think he's a human joystick. I think he's going to do great when he is on the field, but pass blocking for me is a concern. I mean, blazing speed, and not blazing, but I should say pretty fast speed, 4.51, 21st percentile speed score, 52nd percentile burst score, 74th percentile agility score. He has several other backs he's competing against here too, as well, to win this number 2 role, including the likes of Quadri Ellison, who seems to be making a splash in camp so far with Arthur Smith.
Well, and Javian Hawkins, like from the perspective of like what roles are these running backs going to take? Mike Davis is much more built to be a 1-2 back, but has a capability of pass catching. Javian Hawkins is 5'9", 183. He is not going to be a first and second down goal line back, third down back to run the ball between the tackles to get that 1 yard short yardage option. I'm not convinced that that's the role that he can play. If they want to use him like a James White, for instance, that's a possibility. As I said, I'm not convinced of Javian Hawkins' role as taking over for Mike Davis later on in the season. Maybe in the pass catching, that's the only possibility. You mentioned Quadri Ellison. He might take the other half. He might be the one that challenges Mike Davis, as you mentioned earlier, for that 1 and 2 role. And we saw Quadri Ellison's rookie year. He was used primarily as a goal line back, got a lot of touchdowns, short yardage. His yards per carry was like 3, less than 3 on some cases for most games. Yeah, 2.7. I think you mentioned that. But really, this is a team that it's very obvious that there's a hole at running back behind Mike Davis. And if Davis goes down for injury, which we saw happen last year after the wear and tear, he stood in admirably for Christian McCaffrey. Absolutely. Played his heart out and he gave all that he had, but it just couldn't last 16 games. So it may be a committee if Davis goes down later in the season between Hawkins and Allison and maybe Arthur Smith.
Patterson.
Arthur Smith went out of his way in an interview with Chris Collinsworth to mention Cordarrelle Patterson and his involvement with with the offense. And Patterson's my running back 55. Hawkins is my running back 62. Allison's my running back 84. I'm just not convinced that they'll use the running backs as the primary way of moving the ball down the field. They're going to be pass first, and I think that that's going to be the Atlanta Falcons offense for 2021.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, Allison's third year returning here for the Falcons, and although I do have him pegged as the primary backup right now, he's only had 23 carries in 2 years, so measly 2.7 yard per carry. I mean, 2 targets in 3 years, meddling 1.9 fantasy points per game. I know he hasn't seen the field much in his first few years, but we just mentioned he's been impressing Arthur Smith. This number 2 role is up for grabs. I think it's definitely a camp battle that's going to be worth monitoring and noting for this offseason.
And I know we mentioned, Cordarrelle Patterson in passing, but last season, Patterson had 25 targets for Chicago, but 64 rushes. And he had 3.6 yards per attempt, which isn't great. But, I mean, his involvement and he was drafted by Minnesota to be great, to be a playmaker and a dynamic one at that. So I know he's 29 years old, but this was a player intentionally signed by the Falcons to create a lot of flexibility. So I wouldn't be surprised once again if he's used more than we expect or maybe project in the rushing category, but also that he steals precious receptions away from Mike Davis drafters. I know he's going to be that sound for all you Mike Davis truthers. So
I would be so sad if Cordarrelle Patterson starts stealing all the passing work here from Mike Davis. You might want to start checking the obituaries if that's the fact.
Oh boy. Oh boy.
So other notables include, though, Caleb Huntley. We just mentioned Cordarrelle Patterson. I think Caleb Huntley is a talented player. I'm just not sure how much he's going to see the field here in this offense. I think you have to hammer the nail. It's going to be a pass-heavy offense. And speaking of, I think that's next. Brings to Calvin Ridley.
Please. I want one moment about Caleb Huntley.
Okay, do your moment about Caleb Huntley. Rock and roll. Sorry to cut you short there.
Caleb Huntley back in 2017 rushed for 1,000 yards for Ball State. And then in 2019, again, he rushed for over 1,000, almost 1,300 yards for Ball State. This is a player, if anyone takes over for the 1-2 role behind maybe Allison, maybe he doesn't fit, Huntley might be the guy. He's built that way. He's 5'10", 210, which is like 30 pounds heavier than Javian Hawkins. So like this is this is definitely a player that is of interest in very deep dynasty leagues. Just throwing that out there.
Yeah, that would be really nice, though, if Cordarrelle Patterson had running back eligibility. I mean, I love those hybrid players. Like, I was so disappointed when Sleeper just recently removed Robert Tonyan from wide receiver because he had the tight end wide receiver eligibility on Sleeper. And I just did a best ball draft over there with a bunch of guys I know. And I took him like a round and a half earlier than I would be normally comfortable taking him because he had the dual eligibility. And especially in a best ball format, it's gold. And then like, randomly I woke up and it's gone. I'm like, oh, thanks for the heads up here, Sleeper. Like, we're in the middle of doing drafts and you just remove someone's eligibility, but neither here nor there.
There was a wide receiver for the Miami Dolphins who also had running back eligibility taken away.
Yeah, it happens all the time, and I understand. I mean, he shouldn't have had it to begin with. I mean,
he's a converted wide receiver, which is why.
Yeah, but still, he's running like 90% of his stuff inside. Yeah, I understand. I get it.
All right. We need to talk about the wide receivers, right,
so,
Billy?
I love it. So Calvin Ridley, I was so high on him already going into 2021, and then after the Julio trade, Ridley moved up to my number 2 wide receiver in 2021. Ridley finished 2020 as wide receiver 5 in fantasy points, 8th in touchdowns with a total of 9, 4th in yards, 1,374 receiving yards in 2020. 6th in hog rate, 82.8%. That's pretty damn freaking good. Ridley is now the de facto number 1 wide receiver in an offense with 137 vacated targets, with the only real addition being Kyle Pitts. I mean, I expect this offense to be funneled through Ridley much of the season, and I wouldn't be surprised if he did finish as the wide receiver 1 here in 2020.
Well, you shouldn't be surprised because I actually do have him as my wide receiver 1 overall. I had him as my wide receiver 5 going into this season before the Julio trade. And I think what makes the difference between Ridley and other wide receivers he catches a ton of touchdowns.
Yes, he does.
Like that was the difference, but that's what kept Ridley and Julio Jones very close for me in their rankings last year and the year before. I thought Julio would get a lot of yardage. Calvin Ridley would convert a lot of the touchdowns. And then we saw Ridley actually level up in a lot of the yards. I mean, Ridley's been an excellent player his whole career. It just struggled with injuries for a couple seasons. But in Julio's absence last season, Calvin Ridley averaged over 11 targets per game. Like we're talking a 30% target share. I have Calvin Ridley projected only for a 26% target share, but holy guacamole, I think he gets almost 180 targets, 1,600 receiving yards, 14 touchdowns. This is my number one wide receiver overall. We've seen Calvin Ridley level up, and now he's the alpha on a team that needs to move the ball downfield, and they will see success doing that. And we've seen it in the past with Calvin Ridley. So draft Calvin Ridley with confidence. Know that you're not going to need to draft him as your wide receiver, as the wide receiver one overall. Typically it's going to be Tyreek Hill and AJ Brown and Devontae Adams going up there, but know that like Diggs, Ridley has the
Hopkins.
Upside to be the one and to smash at the one.
Yeah, I'm a little more bullish than you are. I mean, wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2 is not, significant in overall rankings, but in fantasy points here, I have about 53 fantasy points less than you do in the season. I have 159 targets versus your 178. I have 103 receptions. The 1,400 yards, 1,415 to be exact. The biggest difference for you and I is touchdowns. I only have them at 10. I just think that without Julio on the field, I think that he is going to see maybe some more double teams. He's going to see, a lot more number one coverage. And I know he saw that as well last year when the games that Julio missed and he still performed. I just think there's defenses are going to be able to hone in a little bit more on Ridley with the loss of Julio. Still, nonetheless, 308 fantasy points in full PPR leagues, 19 fantasy points per game is what I have him projected for.
Well, at least the Atlanta Falcons know that they have a bona fide number 2 wide receiver on the team, a good faith wide receiver 2, and that's Russell Gage. I was touting Russell Gage last year. Go get him, go get him, go get him. And he ended up absolutely smashing. He won a lot of weeks as a flex play for many fantasy managers during 2020. Gage was my offseason love, and he proved to be a useful flex play. He had almost a 22% target share and the 9th most red zone targets among wide receivers. His hog rate was 25th, so still wide receiver 2. And he was 25th among wide receivers in receptions. I think I'm a little low in my projection of Russell Gage at wide receiver 58. I have him projected 3rd on the team behind Ridley and behind Pitts. But I think it remains to be seen how else the Atlanta Falcons look to move the ball like 15 to 20 yards down the field instead of 12 to 15, So I think that that's going to be an interesting dynamic, seeing how they can get it down the field. Russell Gage is not like a speedster. He doesn't possess like exceptional athleticism, but he's definitely proven himself to be a valuable wide receiver. He shouldn't be overlooked. And as the cheapest option of those 3 pass catchers, Pitts, Ridley, and Gage, I think he's worth a flyer still.
Yeah, I remember you touting up Gage. It was like, I would say like March of last year. And I didn't really listen at first, Bradley, but then once he started
like
playing
this
more,
is once again, like I keep saying things and Billy doesn't listen, except you listened on Tunyon. So
I did listen on Tunyon. Yes. I liked Tunyon after watching tape and doing everything. I do my own research after Bradley gives me his insights, and I did
Billy says no, Bradley's wrong, and then he looks it up and he's like, well, only a little wrong. Only a little wrong.
He might be right on this one. But Russell Gage here again. So you have, what'd you say, wide receiver 50? What?
Wide receiver 58, but I have him for like 14 points more than you.
Yeah, and that's where he's going in drafts. I mean, like today in a fantasy FFPC football guys draft, he went as wide receiver 53. So I mean, that's the range he's going in. It's that was that like 11 range. Yeah, it's like 11/12 turn is like where he's going. So I think that's the right spot for him. I mean, we're only 14 points separated here.
It's pretty close.
It's really close. I mean, 657 yards versus your 760. I have, four touchdowns versus 3. Yours breaks down to just attempts from Matt Ryan, where mine is just less, so just less to be distributed. But we both have him for 16% target share. I think that's probably the right spot for him, especially with the addition of Kyle Pitts.
All right. Well, speaking of
Kyle
for
Pitts,
me to plant my flag, Billy. I didn't think I would be planting the Kyle Pitts flag, but here we are, July 9th, 2021, and Kyle Pitts, I'm planting my flag. Tell me why I'm wrong on Kyle Pitts.
because he'd have to break every single NFL trend in history. That's the first one. Second one is he's not an inline blocker. So we're going to see Hayden Hurst on the field. But that being said, they may just move Pitts outside as a jumbo receiver, which I think is what he is more anyways. So maybe Hurst will play inline, Pitts outside, takes on the receiving role. But when it comes to blocking schemes or maybe, I think Pitts comes off the field. So for me, his upside is limited by his lack of blocking and his skill inside blocking, because I think that's going to limit how much he sees the field. I know that Arthur Smith runs a shit ton of 12 personnel. It's the most in the league, but I still think that it's going to limit his time on the field versus what people are expecting here as a rookie in 2021.
Okay. And you have him at tight end what?
It's not finalized, but roughly 6.
Okay. So I have him 2 spots higher, tight end 4. And I think Matt Ryan can sustain all of these players. Like, I think he can sustain a respectable target share for Mike Davis and Javian Hawkins. I have them combined at 14%, including another 5% to Cordarrelle Patterson. So that's almost 20% to the running back. A 26% target share to Ridley, a 16% target share to Russell Gage, an 18% target share to Kyle Pitts. And I think you hit the hammer on the nail. I think that Hayden Hurst is going to be on the field a lot, but he's going to fill primarily that blocking role, freeing up Kyle Pitts to play more of that receiver, like that big receiver role, pseudo Julio Jones. I mean, he's 6'6", 246. This is a player who many scouts have described as the unicorn. I hate saying that because it feels like it's
cliche.
It's everyone's calling him that. But let's take a step back here.
How can you be a unicorn when you're a Falcon, Bradley? That doesn't make any sense.
The Unicorn Falcons. Maybe that's what they should. The Atlanta Unicorns. Where else are the targets going to go? I mean, I've projected pretty high target shares for a lot of other players, and maybe I'm too low on Russell Gage, but I gave him 16%. I know he got 22 last year, but that was with Julio gone for half of the season pretty much. And Hayden Hurst, I have him at 11%. Hayden Hurst is my tight end 16. It's not like he's a schlep. He's not like tight end 30. He's not going to be forgotten. So I think that there's a lot of targets to still be given to Kyle Pitts. I understand, the rookie wall, the only tight end to finish in the top 10 for rookies in the last 10 years was Evan Ingram, and that was because of injuries, right? On the New York Giants. I think that the Atlanta Falcons are going to be intentional about using Kyle Pitts as a receiver. They didn't spend a number 4 overall pick to not use him and to not win games. If we remember from last year, the Atlanta Falcons, they didn't have a great record. That's why they were the 4th pick in the NFL draft, but their expected win total was about 8. They were supposed to win half of their games. They underperformed significantly. There's still a tremendous amount of talent on this team, both offensively and defensively. They're going to play competitive games. They are not loser teams like Detroit or the New York Jets or whatever other teams we expect to still pick in the top 5 for the Jaguars. We still expect them to pick in the top 5 of this coming year. The Atlanta Falcons are not in that position, and that's why they did not start over with Matt Ryan and instead chose Kyle Pitts. Yeah,
so I understand all that, and they're all valid points. my thing is, so, like, looking at like history here. So you haven't projected for, what is it, 128 targets?
18% target share, 128 targets. Yeah.
So how many players in the NFL in the tight end position last year had 125 targets or more?
I'm sure you have that up. I mean, I can check that out here. What, three? Two, three?
Yeah, Darren Waller, Travis Kelce. So then from there, Logan Thomas on an Alex Smith-led Washington football team who is known for targeting the tight end, only had 110. Evan Ingram, with all the injuries that team sustained, had 109. TJ Hawkinson, 101. So looking back to 2019, only one player had more than 120. Let me correct myself. One player had more than 107 targets, and that's only
in 2019.
Yes, and that was only Kelce.
We have Ertz and Kelce.
Sorry, thank you.
Yeah,
Ertz and Kelce.
Historically, it's against him. I don't disagree with you about the history, but that's where we look at like the importance of seeing this team dynamic. Like, where else are these targets going to go? Who are they going to be funneled to? And I mean, it's not like Kyle Pitts hasn't been used or he's been taking OTAs off. This is a player that they've intentionally been using in red zone packages in the OTAs already. Like, they're intentionally placing him in positions in practice this summer to be an immediate impact player. So I get it. It's not, I hate to be the cliche, because a lot of other fantasy analysts, not only for Dynasty, but also for redraft, are very high on Kyle Pitts. I didn't think I would come to this conclusion, but I think Kyle Pitts is going to be a top 5 tight end, and I think it's going to be pretty clear.
And I know that I'm on the outside looking in here. There's a couple players, especially in the first few rounds, that I have planted this flag on. Kyle Pitts being one. There's one certain running back that I won't mention. That is another one. Most of Twitter knows who that is by now. But
you won't want to burn down YouTube as well.
I think we'll skip on the burning today. It's a pretty hot day. I don't want to cause any fires. But there's
team rhymes with jams.
Yeah. So Kyle Pitts, 120 targets, and I'm not saying that your projection's wrong. I just think it's a little high. I mean, 128 targets is a lot for some, especially as a rookie. I mean, I haven't projected not much less. I mean, 106. I think that jump from like 110 to 125 is just huge in the NFL in terms of from a tight end position. And I can't find myself giving him that many targets. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if he finished in the 90 range, honestly. And I, that's why I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt. I'm giving him that extra, dozen or so in that low 100 range. I think it's a tough number to reach.
So, I mean, you hit on it. If your projection is right about Sam Cakers. Oh, we need to be very careful. We need to be YouTube is dry, and we've just like started sparks right now. We need to be very careful,
So I love it was a comment. So since Josh was part of that, a part of that tweet, it was who was the best or who was the most overrated handcuff in the NFL, and I said Cam Akers, and he posted the Jim Carrey, here we go again. And did you see the fantasy footballers liked it?
I did. Oh man, very dry. Yeah, California is known for their wildfires there. Really, and if you're right about Darrell Henderson, then look out. There are going to be some people losing a lot of money banking on Sam Cakers. But we're going to redirect back to Hayden Hurst, the other tight end here. I think we've spent a lot of time talking about Pitts, but it's not like Hayden Hurst isn't he's going anywhere. At least this year, the Atlanta Falcons did decline Hurst's 5th-year option after trading a 2nd-round pick for him last year. And Hayden Hurst finished as a back-end tight end 1, albeit very unimpressively. Like, anyone who drafted Hayden Hurst and expected big things from him, they were disappointed. He spent a lot of time blocking and didn't spend a lot of time catching as many passes as you'd hope. He's my tight end 16 with an 11% target share, 50 receptions, 5 touchdowns, 548 yards. I think he's a value right now, even with the existence of Kyle Pitts. What do you think, Billy?
Hurst is my second most owned tight end inside the FFPC across all formats. I mean, that's best ball, that's main event, that's FBG. I own him in 19.23% of my leagues. The only tight end I own more is Noah Fant. And that's just because you know that I have this unhealthy love for Noah Fant. But I mean, that being said, I think Hurst is going to be in the field a lot more. I mean, we talked about Arthur Smith and 12 personnel. We've beat that horse till it's dead all off season, and how much that he's going to be involved.
That Falcon till it's dead, right?
That unicorn as well. We're going to beat next.
Ooh. That was too appropriate.
I mean, so Hurst last year, they'll finish 2020 as tight end 9 fantasy points. He was ninth in touchdowns with 6, 14th in yards with 571, 13th in air yards. And I know Kyle Pitts is in town now. That's where, you know, these numbers are drastically changing. And I just think that people are underestimating the development that we're going to see from Hurst here. We just talked about, you know, the vacated targets that they have, 137 vacated targets. When we moved them around here in our projections, it was tough to, you know, disperse all those targets because there's just a lack of playmakers in this offense outside Ridley, outside Pitts now, and outside of, I mean, Russell Gage. That's really it. I mean, looking at my projections, I also have Hurst here at 11%, 65. I'm a little bit lower on you, 65 targets, 43 receptions, 582 yards, 4 touchdowns, 125 fantasy points. So I'm exactly 8 fantasy points below you on the season. So we're very close in our projections, Hayden Hurst, and that's why he's my second most owned tight end in all FFPC formats.
Now, if we remember, Hurst was also drafted to be great by the Baltimore Ravens. He was a first-round pick. Okay, yep. Let's not forget that he has a 4.67 40-yard dash, and he's 6'5", 250. Okay, this is a player who can really move. 81st percentile speed score, you know, average metrics the rest of the way. But
yeah, he's not an average Joe. Like it's not like he's throwing out, you know, Max Williams out there, right?
Oh,
that's from the Tuesday show.
Another
If you missed it, go back and watch our Tuesday show. We talked Max Williams talking the Arizona Cardinals.
Well, I'll take an aside for just a moment, and Hayden Hurst, last offseason came out and did open up, and this is more of a personal thing than fantasy football. He did open up about his struggles with mental health issues, and so we really do want to, you know, draw attention to, you know, taking those issues seriously. So, of course, if you need help, you know, Hayden Hurst has a foundation. So definitely take a look into that. And if you haven't heard his story, it's certainly heartbreaking and heart-wrenching, but at the same time, you know, inspiring that this is a player who he was a baseball player for a while, really struggled mentally with what was going on, and was able to get, you know, help even in the darkest times. So this is a player who's overcome a lot. He's a really excellent human being and an excellent player, and a great player for the Atlanta Falcons organization. So, yeah, wish him all the best of success as well. He is we'll bring it back to fantasy. He is my tight end 16 and frankly, a value even with the existence of Kyle Pitts.
Oh, I agree on the value. Well, everybody, that's going to wrap up our Atlanta Falcons show tonight. It was a short one, just one team here for the evening. Make sure to tune in. So next Tuesday, we actually are going to be live. In the beginning of the podcast, I said we don't go live on Tuesdays, but we're going to be live next Tuesday at 6:00 because we actually have a guest coming on. So we have beat writer Aaron Reese coming on from the Texans. So we're going to get to pick a Texans beat writer brain a little bit. We're going to, you know, dive into this team that I think, like, honestly, was one of the hardest for me to project. Just because of, you know, Deshaun Watson news, what's going to happen, who's going to be leading, you know, this backfield, who's going to be throwing the ball. There's just so many question marks.
Who's going to be catching the ball, frankly?
I'm not going to lie. This team's a hot mess. Like they just took anyone off of free agency and just threw it against the wall and saw what kind of shit was going to stick. And that's what we're seeing here.
You know what didn't stick? Chad Hansen didn't stick.
Yeah, Chad Hansen did not stick. And we better hope that all these allegations against Deshaun Watson doesn't stick, or else this is going to be a really ugly 2021 for the Texans.
It's already been an ugly offseason. And even if all these things all the allegations don't stick, like, does he even want to play for the Texans? I don't think so.
Yeah, there's just so many unknowns. So hopefully Aaron will be able to kind of help us dissect some of this news, dissect kind of what's going on in the organization. try to get some insider news with Deshaun Watson. That's why we want to have these beat writers on to help us get a more in tune, I should say, understanding of what's happening with these offenses and these teams. So don't miss next Tuesday, 6 o'clock live here on the
6 o'clock
Football Channel.
The 9
Pacific,
Eastern.
yep, 9 Eastern. I just thank you, Bradley, for clarifying. And so we'll make sure that we dig in deep to the Texans here with a beat writer. So thanks for tuning in. Thanks for joining us, and we will see you all back here on Tuesday. Have a good night.